guys, happy Monday. It's a Monday today anyway when I recorded this. I'm just kind of putzing around my house here in between office hours, trying to think of a way to give you some sort of project to do on these lazy days after you're done with your schoolwork, especially with Earth Day coming up, or it's past by the time I put this out there. But so in social studies, we've been learning a lot about Chinampas, and the more I thought about it, I'm like, hey, why don't I try to make my own? So I'm gonna try to kind of make a miniature version. So I just happen to have some stuff laying around my house. It's pretty easy to do if you can bike somewhere to a park or something and just pick up a few things. I just happen to have some cheap seeds laying around my house that I haven't planted. Just cheap garden seeds, some a mixture of flowers. Remember, Chinampas were a way for the Aztecs to take control of their watery environment. So they would obviously plant corn, beans, squash, also known as the Three Sisters, just to kind of provide for them. They wouldn't plant flowers because that doesn't really help them nutritionally. But that's what I'm going to use just to show that this might actually work. So all you need, I just have this container laying around. It's going to hold my Chinampa. This is kind of like the land. I have some sticks that I'm going to put together. I remember these are floating gardens that they made on their own. They would use logs and twigs and palm branches, things like that. I do have my seeds, and I also just dug up some dirt in my backyard that I'm going to use. So I'm kind of right now starting to make this frame. So I'm going to make a square frame or a rectangular frame. So I started with the thought of just making a rectangular frame with sticks. Kind of in the process of that. So I thought, maybe I'll use some rubber bands, but the more I thought about it, I'm like, that's not natural. So I'm gonna try to make this as natural as possible. So I grabbed a few sticks and just kind of stripped some bark off of a stick, and I made this natural twine here. So I'm gonna use that to connect the four corners. If you want to really get crazy, try to weave the sticks together, and that would work as well. I tried that already. You really need some flexible sticks, and what I have here are just dead branches, so they're so dry they just crack right away. So all right, so I've been working a little bit here. I tied those ends together on that basic rectangular frame, and as I moved along, I've kind of woven together this raft, if you will. This is going to be that floating part. So now what I want to do is kind of work on filling in that gap and allowing making it a little bit more solid. I'm gonna use grass, I'm gonna use birch bark that I have in my wood pile, all these other sticks, and then I'll put in grass too. So I want it to be mostly just a solid platform that my mud isn't going, when I put mud on top, it's not gonna seep through, but then the roots of my plants can also get down to the water as well. So I'm gonna continue work in just making this a little bit more dense to support that mud and so on. So here I have my completed raft with birch bark, and what I'm going to do now is just kind of fill in those smaller gaps with this grass that my neighbor had growing through my fence. So I went and picked a bunch of that out. So right now I'm just going to kind of fill that in a little bit before I start putting the mud on top. So here I have the completed raft. So now my goal is to get some mud. I got my mud right here. I'm actually gonna put some water in that mud, just kind of cake it on there as much as I can to provide that bed for the seeds that I'm gonna plant on there. Now keep in mind, I've never done this before. I've never seen a YouTube video on this before. I don't even know if it's gonna work. But it's just a crazy idea I had in my head after learning about the Aztecs and their creative ways of agriculture. So just something that I was interested in. It's always great to start your own project, be original. So I just realized, to put this on there and kind of cake it on there, I'm gonna want my soil pretty wet. I wanna kind of cake the soil on there. So I really took some time, added some water to my soil, just to get that right consistency of being able to just cake it on there, so that when it dries out a little bit, it'll just kind of hold form to what I was hoping for. So you almost want that like cookie dough texture, if you will. I noticed I scooped up some worms on there too, so instantly I'm gonna have some wildlife to help my seeds grow. So I'm gonna get this soil onto my raft and we'll see what happens. So another thing about doing this is just to kind of put yourself in other people's shoes and think of, how complex it must be to think of this. This is a scale model of this. Keep in mind that these were pretty large Chinampas, and there were many of them. Keep in mind that like when the Aztecs were putting mud on here, they were in the water, digging mud out of the water and putting it onto their raft. Whereas I could just go in my backyard and shovel up some with this. So think of all the labor that must have went into this, which really shows the importance of why they were doing this. Okay, so we're kind of getting to that moment now where I'm going to plant the seeds. So I'm going to plant them. Those flowers are just kind of scatter over. I do have some, I also have some turnips. So I'm going to plant a row of those on here, 3 or 4 seeds, just to see, what we get for germination in here. We're also getting to that moment of truth where I'm going to actually set this raft into water to see if it floats. So we'll see how that works. Stay tuned. Just a little update for you. After lifting this wet mud on the raft, I didn't think it'd really the sticks would be able to support the weight. So what I did is I went and found one very dry log. They're about 1.5 inches, 2 inches in diameter, and line them on the bottom. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set this raft right on top of there, and hopefully, if everything works all right, when I fill that up, the whole raft will lift up. So the purpose is, remember, is that I don't really have to water these plants, as the water should kind of soak up through the straw in the bushes. But also keep in mind that Aztecs lived in a very wet culture, so they didn't really have to water crops anyway because of the rain that came all the time. So let's just kind of see what happens here. All right, so we're down to our moment of truth. I apologize for the mess. Obviously, it's a messy project. Don't do it inside. I'm doing it in the comfort of my own workroom that I'm going to clean up. But productive messes aren't always bad messes. So I'm gonna set this on top of here, okay? And it's actually, I'm not gonna say it's floating, but it's pretty high up already. So I'm gonna take some water and cross my fingers here that this thing starts to float after filling it up a little bit. All right, so let's see here. It's not clean water by any means. That's okay. This is the same bucket I had my mud in. My dirt. Don't call it mud around Miss Cundy. There we go. And it is floating. So I now have my floating garden that I intend to plant my plants in. And if I want to make this really authentic, I'd be adding, I could put some minnows in there, maybe I will, from my recent fishing trip, or some crayfish, and so on. Remember, there's so many benefits to this aquaculture, to the Aztecs and us. So I'm gonna go ahead and plant my seeds. Now to do that, I'm just gonna poke holes here and there and put seeds in there and cover them for my turnips. And then over here, I'm gonna kind of scatter that that flower mix that I have, just to see how this all works, okay? All right, so I'm here next to Bucky. So I have my floating garden here, as you can kind of see here. So it's all set to go. My Chinampa, my model of a Chinampa. You can kind of see I had a little extra there. I happen to have some green onions in my fridge from all the hearty cooking I've been doing. I didn't want to go to the store for anything for this project because it really wasn't essential. Because I'm trying to stay safe in this time. That's why we're not in school. I wish I was in school. I miss you guys. But it's just a fun project to kind of get your hands dirty, get outside, gather some things, and be resourceful, which is exactly what the Aztecs did with the Chinampas. So thinking about this particular project, it wasn't very complex, just grabbing things and so on, but the idea of this is complex. And if you think about how much work it took to make one of these in nature and take over nature, and keep in mind it wasn't just one, it was a collection of many. So it is a very complex idea. It might not, it's a lot of hard work, but it's not complex work, but it's just the idea of thinking about all this, creating their own mini ecosystem to allow them to survive. So just something you can do at home. The days are getting really nice. It's nice to get outside and collect things. I'll try to keep you posted about how my Chinampa is doing here, sending pictures and so on, but kind of excited about it. I'm proud of the work that I've done. So I hope you've been proud of the work that you've done in school so far. As a teacher, it's very different than being in the classroom and seeing your faces. So I hope you're doing well, and we'll stay in touch. Take care.